Yes, well, the big event is about to begin, and I am going to read you a story. Can you hear me from wherever you are? Excellent. All right, well, I have written many rhymes in my time, but I thought I would read a story today about Peter Rabbit. Have you all heard of Peter Rabbit? Well, I'm going to read his story this morning instead of one of my very own rhymes, but I do have many. I've recited some this morning on demand from some mothers. Thank you, mothers. Happy to do it. So, here's the tale of Peter Rabbit. Do you see him, Peter Rabbit, right there on the front? Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. I need my goose to rest with, Mindy. Will you please take my goose? He needs a nap. Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, my dears, said Mrs. Rabbit one morning, you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put into a pie by Mrs. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella to the baker's and went through the wood. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Do you know what a currant is? No. It's like a little bitty tiny dried up raisin. They're very good. You should try them sometime. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. Do you like radishes? No. Well, you should try those too. They're very good. A little dash of salt. Lovely. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. To settle his stomach, you know. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? That's right. Oh, no. Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees, planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. He lost both of his shoes. Have you ever lost a shoe? Raise your hand if you've lost a shoe. Did you get in trouble with your mother? I did. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster, so that I think he might have got away altogether if he had not, unfortunately, run into a gooseberry net. That's like a fence. And got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Get out, Peter, get out! Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop upon the top of Peter, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind. He's also left his jacket now. How many of you left a jacket at school? Oh, yes, your mother loves that too. And rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. He jumped into a watering can. Ew. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. How does that sound? Achoo! Do it with me all together. Achoo! And Mr. McGregor was after him in no time, and tried to put his foot upon Peter, who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired running after Peter, so he went back to work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath, and after a time he began to wander about, going libbity-libbity, not very fast, just looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked, and he started to cry, but he found a little mouse with a little pea in his mouth. And she just shook her head at him because she didn't know how to help him out. And Peter began to cry. Our poor rabbit. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he got more puzzled and more lost. But after he talked to a cat, which he thought he should get away from, because cats like rabbits, you know, extra specially, he went on across the garden. He went back towards the tool shed, but he heard the hoe, the scritch, scritch, scritch of Mr. McGregor's hoe, and so he ran the other way towards the gate. He got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could, and he slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up his little jacket and his little shoes and made a scarecrow out of all of his clothes. Hopefully that never happens to you with your lost shoes and jackets. No, we don't want that. Peter never stopped running, and when he got home, he was so tired he just fell down on the floor and went to sleep and took a nap. Very, very tired. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made him some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper, because they're good little bunnies. The end. Peter Rabbit's favorite story, Easter Bunny's favorite story, Peter Rabbit. And now, listen carefully, because here are the instructions for Easter egg roll.